From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you all for coming. I'm Mary Jane Deeb. I'm the Chief of the African Middle East Division, and I'm delighted to see you all here, and so welcome. Some of you are new, some of you have been here many times before. So before we start the program, let me say something about our division. We are the African Middle East Division, and we include 78 countries in terms of our responsibility. Those 78 countries are part of the whole African continent, North and Sub-Saharan Africa. We have the whole Middle East that extends to from Morocco to Afghanistan. We also include, under the Near East section, Central Asia, Armenia and Georgia. And we have the Hebraic section, which also includes collections that come from all over the world to the collections. Now, the collections that we are custodian of are in the languages of those countries. In other words, if you're doing research on, let's say today's topic on Lebanon, if you were looking for sources in Arabic, they would be part of our collections here. But if those sources on Lebanon were in English or French or German or Greek or Italian, they would be part of the general collection. In other words, we collect in the vernacular and in the scripts of those countries. Our programs include, so we collect and we serve these materials to the audience. But we also do exhibits, and we've had some major exhibits in the past 5 years on Afghanistan. We've had one on the Hebrew book, we had one on the Persian book, we had one on the Armenian book, and we're possibly trying now to raise funds and have one on the Arabic book and on the African book. We also have symposia, and we bring scholars from all over the world to discuss various topics. We just had 2 recently, one on the ancient city of Tyre in Lebanon, and we had international archaeologists, museum keepers, curators, artists, and others come and participate. And we had a Juneteenth symposium, a conference, on the end of slavery. And again, it was, we had packed audiences in both cases. So why are we doing these things? We're doing this in order to make our collections come alive. We collect books, and we take care of them, we preserve them, we store them, we serve them. But we also want people to understand how those cultures and those societies live, how they speak, how they vote, how they write. And it is through these programs, through the scholars who come and share with us the work they have done, through film producers, as we have today, that we make these cultures live in your imaginations, in your thoughts. We just had a wonderful program on Ethiopia with someone who had gone to Ethiopia and had filmed and taken photographs of the beautiful topography of Ethiopia, the mountains, the lakes, the fields. So in this way, those of us who are lucky enough to be present leave this 1-hour presentation enriched and more knowledgeable than when they first came to the library. We are also addressing people outside of the library, across the world, because since we're webcasting our programs, people from every continent in the world can have access to these programs and see them and learn about the programs we're doing. So now I would like to introduce our Arab world specialist, Dr. Muhannad Salhi, a historian, a graduate from the University of Chicago, and the person who has organized today's event. I want to say a couple of words also about our specialists in all our 3 sections, the African, the Near East, and the Hebraic section. They're all scholars themselves. They have written, they have published, they are quoted in books, and they know the society and the culture and the languages of the region. So our scholar, Dr. Muhannad Salhi, will introduce the speaker and the film producer today. Muhannad.
Our speaker today, and documentary filmmaker, I should say, is Ruwan Itani. She is a Lebanese-American filmmaker based in Washington, D.C., local. And Ms. Itani started her media career in broadcast TV in Beirut, Lebanon, before coming to the United States, where she earned her MA in film and video producing. She runs a boutique media production company, Aflama LLC, and has several years of experience creating corporate, documentary, and educational video projects. She is fluent in Arabic, French, and English. Madam Parliamentarian, the movie we're about to see, or the documentary, I should say, that we're about to see, is her first independent film. So without further ado, Ruwan Itani.
Hello, I would like to thank Mary Jane and Dr. Muhannad Salhi from the Near East section of the African and Middle Eastern Division of the Library of Congress for organizing this event and inviting me here today. And thank you all for being here for this hour together. Just a few words about the documentary film that we're going to be seeing. It's a short, it's 16 minutes. It's entitled Madam Parliamentarian. Just to give you a general context, I usually like to take Q&As after the film, but just to give you a general setting, it was filmed during the last 2 elections of Lebanon, 2005 and 2009, and it focuses on the participation of women in the Lebanese parliament. I'll just say a couple of things about the general political or parliamentarian system in Lebanon. In general, Lebanon is population consists of, we just say roughly 50% Christian, 50% Muslim, and the distribution of the seats in the Lebanese parliament try to reflect that. So the way the seats are identified or located follow a religious quota in a way. So the terms confessionalism or sectarianism will be mentioned a couple of times in the film and probably by me in the Q&A after. And that's what these terms refer to. I know that for some people in the United States or other places, they might not be familiar with the term confessionalism or sectarianism, and that's what it refers to. It's basically how the parliament, the seats in the parliament have certain quotas to reflect the religious diversity of the population in Lebanon. I think I'll leave it at that for now, and we'll watch the film and we can discuss later. Thank you.
Since Lebanon's independence in 1943, only 10 women have reached the Lebanese parliament. With each election comes new hope that more women will be elected to fill leadership positions.
independence in 1933, and women got their right to vote in 1952. That happened due to a very big civic campaign that happened by one of the oldest women NGOs that is still operating in Lebanon, called the Lebanese Council of Women.
They started demanding, they were pressuring members of parliament, politicians to really grant to women their political rights on the basis of the principle of equality stated in the Constitution. During that time, from 53 till 72, 3-4 women run, they withdrew before the elections take place. Patterns were really tough. The amount of money that you needed to deposit to run was beyond the abilities of women. In 1963, Mirna Bustani was the first woman elected to parliament. She filled the seat of her deceased father, but only for 6 months. And then in 1975, a civil war broke out and lasted 16 years until 1991. During this period, no parliamentary elections took place. The war ended in 1991. Leila Awad was appointed to replace her husband. She was the only woman representative out of 128 seats. A total of only 10 women ever reached parliament.
All the profiles of these women elected, with the exception of current MP Ghilwa Jalloul, were elected because of the traditional and familial ties, not because really of the political or social affiliations. Nina Bistani was the daughter of a late MP Emile Bistani. Bahia Hariri, sister of a late assassinated Prime Minister. Nahal Asad, sister of a late prominent politician. Nuhal Saeed, wife of a late MP. Sitrida Jaja, wife of a leader politician. Gilbert Zouain, daughter of a late MP. We can say that Lebanese women parliamentarians have been branded as the woman dressed in black, because historically the most likely way for women to be elected was to replace their husbands or sons or brothers.
After serving in parliament for a number of years, Naila Moawad and Solange Gemayel, both wives of late assassinated presidents, left their seats for their sons. A woman is able to inherit the seat until the male heir comes of age and is ready to assume the position of his father or wife. They did contribute to drafting law proposals, they did contribute to establishing regulations and listening to civil society associations. They didn't have the guts to stand and say, I am a woman. They were afraid of being accused of being feminist or female activists.
The women that are getting parliament now are not representative of the women's movement.
The women's movement in Lebanon is a vibrant community of more than 140 organizations lobbying for increased women's participation in political life and for laws on domestic violence, spousal rape, sexual harassment, and the right to grant citizenship to their husbands and children. The Lebanese Association for Democratic Elections, LADE, is an activist organization that encourages women to run for political office. Before recent elections, LADE launched media campaigns.
مش طبيعي انه يكون 1.5% من البرلمان اللبناني فيه نساء، وفي عندنا تقريبا 54% من الشعب اللبناني. ما لازم ينسوا انه الديمقراطيه مش موجوده بلا حقوق المرأة.
We handed out many pamphlets and leaflets. We went out to the press, encouraging for not just to vote, it's also important for them to actually stand as candidates, to be leaders in society.
This is part of the TV spot that was aired on
المناطق اللبنانيه حتى بجنود يعني المناطق اللبنانيه، فعملت رد فعل كثير اجاني اتصالات على البوسترات.
Even if independent
السياسية للانسحابات شق قضايا المرأة وتدرجها من ضمن أولويات قضاياها.
أنا ما بدي الرجال يعطيني حقي، بدي أنا آخذ حقي.
In 1995, a 30% quota for women was recommended at the 4th World Conference on Women in Beijing and is being implemented by many countries around the world. Comparing Lebanon to other Arab countries, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Jordan, and Iraq have quotas and more women in political positions. A 30% quota for women has been proposed to the Lebanese parliament. They rejected it twice.
It's something to set in order. It's an initiative for women to participate and to teach society that women should be in political life.
It was only going to reserve seats on the candidates lists. Was it going to reserve seats only for women?
احنا بنعتبر انه الكوتا والاصلاحات اللي كانت مطروحه رفضت لانه النظام الطائفي السياسي بلبنان نظام متخلف، نظام مهزوم، نظام يعيد ايصال الشباب والنساء واصحاب الخبره لمراكز صنع القرار.
I hope that those who feel capable arrive, and I hope that those who believe in female representation will start creating some kind of a fund to help candidates.
As an association, we've been calling it for a very long time, and even before the Civil War, if you go straight to the independence, we've had elections since independence. There is a democratic culture. It needs perfecting. It needs work, but we're still a young country.
The women's quota was to be reintroduced to the Lebanese parliament again in 2013, but due to the instability in Lebanon and Syria, the 2013 election and the voting on the quota remained on hold.
Just again, to give a little bit more about the political structure and the demographic structure, to make sense for people who don't know that under the Christian and the Muslim populations, the makeup of the country, there are 17 religious sects. So there are various churches and various divisions of denominations of Islam, Sunni Shia, and a third minority, which is Druze. And under Christians, there are majority Maronite Catholics, Eastern Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, Catholic Orthodox. There are various churches and 2 Armenian churches. So depending on which zones or districts in the country, the population's distribution varies. In some districts, let's say, the population might be more homogeneous in terms of the religious makeup. And in those districts, for instance, in terms of quota, there might be maybe 4 seats for the same religious group allocated for the parliament, so that the people in that district, the electors, will be voting for. When they get a list, an electoral list to vote for, they actually see the names of the candidates, and next to them are the religious affiliation. And then they have several by a specific religious denomination, depending on the makeup of the population within that district. So that's kind of how it works. So it gives you a little bit of a sense. All right, let's take questions.
Thank you very much. It was wonderful. I always wondered, I had always the same question. Why is it that in Lebanon, where women are so free in so many different ways, why are they not represented in Parliament? So I think you're addressing the issue right on, and it's completely. My question is the issue of money. They bring this up again and again, but women in Lebanon are just as wealthy as men. In other words, the money that goes to support a man going into a position, into being elected, can very well be used for a woman. In other words, why is the issue of money being brought in when there are some very wealthy women? And so why is the money issue an issue?
Okay. This takes it, it's really one of the core questions, which comes at the end of the film as a main question. It's a very important piece of the puzzle. And there are various ways to address this. If we kind of go through the chronology of the history from what you've seen in the film, the 10 women who have ever entered Parliament, 9 of them, well, many of them, 9 of them actually have come in because of a man in their family who was in the Parliament or very close to power, political power before them. And they've just kind of filled in the seat of their father, brother, etc., husband. So there's that one layer that the women in the first place, they're not running independently and getting in. That's also a problem for men too. So it's everybody that is kind of a Lebanese phenomenon. There is that aspect of clanship or wealthy families who have been in power in the past who keep kind of coming back again and again and recycling the same family names. So the women's representation is falling under some of those situations also. And one of the issues here is looking into why aren't there independent women in the first place? And then we can talk about, why aren't there independent women who are not part of that whole general political party blocks, the major blocks that have the powers in the country, and those that are within the system, why aren't they even running? Because there's not enough women running also. So it's multi-layered. It's not just the capital. A few years ago, actually when I first filmed in 2005, the media, the access to media to cover a woman's candidate wasn't equivalent. They were giving access to men and they were lumping all the women in kind of like a sidebar. Then there was a change in that law. So now, the last I know is that there is an equality of media access. So both men and women candidates have equal access to show 50% so that's when men and women can have access to the media to cover their campaigns when they're running. So that's an improvement. So there was the question of budget was coming into that it required a lot of money to buy media spots or access to the media to publicize oneself and to run a campaign in general. Women have been found to be campaign managers for men, but it's kind of like the whole structure hasn't been created enough, at least yet, for women candidates to figure out how to channel all, not just the money, but the support, the mechanism, the whole structure of campaigning and promoting themselves. So there's all of that. In addition, the question of access to money for women might be a little bit complex because yes, there are women who are independent and are wealthy. We don't know, again, some of these wealthy women, are they wealthy because they come from that wealthy family clan system that has been in power again? So they're still not regular independent. When I say independent, meaning like not part of that kind of political power structure. If they're coming from that their money probably came through that family. There's also a lot of social pressure, sometimes from within the family, that if a woman comes up and they say, why? Is there a shortage of men in our family? Like, why is the woman gonna take that money? So there are multiple questions, and I think it's a little bit more challenging than just simply a woman saying, I have all this money, I'm just gonna run. It's multi-layered. And that would be maybe a topic for another film, to go and talk to wealthy women and say, why aren't you putting your money in a future campaign? But thank you, that's a very good question. Yes? So like I said, some of those interviews, they were 2005 and 2009, which were the last elections, unfortunately, that have happened. Another set of election was supposed to happen in 2013. Every 4 years is when the election was due. But because of what's been going on in the region with Syria and all the problems, the elections are still on hold. So imagine, since post-war Lebanon, which is 1991 until 2009, there were elections every 4 years, and now the last ones were 2009, which is really a long time. So some of what you're hearing is from those years before, and now the question is, what have things changed if there is an election in 2017, which is the next one that's kind of, they're hoping that would happen. And what at the time, what people meant was that the media coverage, so there is access of women to the media, meaning if women want to put their own spots and promotional campaign, spots and promotions, they have to they have to pay, but also that now both men and women can access it equally. The coverage was that media people themselves, like news, the producers in news media, when they're trying to cover the news or follow the candidates, they would take the male candidates and cover them thoroughly about who this person is, where they come from, what their ideas are, etc., and go on in depth as a one candidate, men. And then they would lump all the women candidates as, and here are the women, as just like, these are just women candidates, but we don't know who they are, really, what they stand for, what they're running for. And that's what they're referring to. I believe so, yeah. That's what I understand, yeah. I don't know the depth of the law, but that's my understanding, is that the media should now allow equal access on the air for male and female, so that they cannot be covering males more extensively and just spending 3 minutes on all the women candidates. Yes? Are you referring to the maps or the map? Mm-hmm.
That was 100%, 100% referred to the total number of people.
I think you may be referring in the pie charts to there is there are a couple things going on there. There's a proposal about having 30%, a quota for women to be 30% of the parliament. So there is that one reference. And this is a percentage that was recommended during the Beijing International Women's Conference. And this is a percentage that is sought after in many countries around the world. So even including right now, several European countries have implemented that, several African countries have implemented that. That's following those Beijing recommendations is what the world is kind of moving towards. And in Lebanon, there has been these efforts by the women's movement to try to ask for that. But there is a pushback from the parliament refusing that. And that's kind of, if you want updated information, that the last number of years, that's what's happening, that the women's movement has had to work with the parliamentarians, the majority male represented parliament of Lebanon, and negotiate how they can have more representation of women in the parliament. The parliament has voted down twice the request to have 30%. So that's not going to happen anytime soon, it doesn't look like. So now then there were conversations about, okay, can we have 20%? Can we have 10%? And now there are other discussions about possibly having what they call a zippered electoral list or candidates list, which means that when the next elections would happen, that people, when they vote, they will see a list with names of male and female, men and women candidates. So every other one will be like male, woman, man, woman, man, woman, man, woman. That's what they call zippered lists. Tunisia, I believe, is implementing that. Many other places are. And it seems to be a good kind of way of showing equally that for the electors to see that you have both names there available for you. And that's still being discussed. Another discussion has been, okay, forget about the 30% of seats that would be set up in the parliament for women. Can we have 30% or something along those lines on the list? So, and when you see the name of the list of the candidates, you're not seeing all men, that we need to have more women on those lists. And so these are some of the proposals that are being still discussed behind closed door, or still kind of ongoing right now.
So I wasn't referring to that actually. I was referring to.
I'll try to repeat. So I think the question was about some of the maps and references to religious distribution in the country. So I'll just try and clarify. The last census that was officially done in Lebanon was 1932. And now people who use the census and that information, they still go back and refer to that, which at the time, generally, roughly speaking, was 50% Christian, 50% Muslim. And the reason those numbers are important is because what you've seen, what I've explained, is that the seats in the parliament try to reflect the demographics of the country. At the end of the civil war, the Lebanese civil war in 1991, there was a change in the parliament distribution. They increased the number of members of parliament to 128. It was less before. It was close to 100. And they made now the distribution of the seats in the parliament 50% Christian, 50% Muslim. So in a way now the parliament is more equitable, if you want to say that. While before there were issues, and that's what people thought about, is one group being represented more, the other has more power than the other, etc. And it's hard right now to know exact numbers of figures of what the demographic, religious, and sects are, because there's no official census being made. So some of these graphs in the film, some of them were from a number of years ago. We don't know. I don't know if anybody has a map or a distribution that is by any means official or definitive. So these are all, roughly depending on what source they came from, who made those estimates. They're more estimates, I would say. And also because the distribution of these religious groups varies depending on sections of the country. And there is also the issue of migration and a lot of displacement due to the Lebanese civil war and other problems where there were a lot of displaced refugees that moved from neighborhood or part of the country or region to the other. So it's really complicated to figure out, what is the real religious distribution or the sectarian distribution. And so that's kind of the larger issue. Yes?
I was wondering about the 30% representation. As you mentioned, Lebanon's political system is sectarian, it's a confessional system. Is one of the stumbling blocks to giving women 30% representation the fact that it is a sectarian system, which, as we know, can be a fragile system that would perhaps overburden it by also giving them? Is that one of the excuses?
Absolutely. So I'll kind of re-answer with including the question, because that's exactly the fact. The reason that why the Parliament has rejected twice that proposal by the women's movement to ask to have 30% of the seats in Parliament to be women, the arguments that come back with no are that we already have all this complicated religious quota that we have to deal with the candidates and the seat distribution. How can we add on top of that another quota for women? That it would make it impossible and very complicated. So that is exactly one. Now the issue of quota is a very controversial issue, and probably in many countries, but very much so in Lebanon. And even the term quota is controversial and very polarizing, and people have a strong reaction to that term quota. So as the years went by, now the women's movement is trying not to even use the term quota, because it divides and polarizes people so badly, like for and against. Some of the women themselves are against the idea of quota, because they feel that it is discriminatory in itself. It's as if women are not qualified or strong or equal or ready. It's kind of like, why do we need to be handed out special treatment? We don't need to be given seats. We can do it on our own. So there's some of that is being said by certain women, and because by law, from the beginning of the independence of the country, the Constitution gives equal rights to men and women to vote, to run. So there is nothing legally that is stopping a woman from running. In terms of voting, there is no problem, because women vote. So women do go and they vote, and the number of voters of women is maybe not 50%, but it's definitely more than 40%, according to the last general surveys that happened in 2009. So it's not a shortage of women voters. And there are various organizations that have been working very strongly on promoting and encouraging women to vote in more numbers, and giving them ID cards and all of the support to vote. So the problem is not on the voting side, it's more on the running, on really women presenting themselves. And I'll just add a couple updates, because the film was, from those years back, that there are 2 or 3 major organisms in the country, independent from the government, but also a couple of semi-governmental organizations that have been working with women candidates, creating leadership training, encouraging women to run, training them on how to run a campaign, how to do public speaking, how to fundraise, all of that. And in 2009, the number of women candidates were only 12. So there were only 12 women who ran for Parliament in 2009, and 4 of those got in. And the last I know, which was a couple of years, 2013, when there was supposed to be an election, there were up to 40 candidates, women candidates. And this is believed to be due to the fact of having organizations now systematically working with women in a kind of a more organized way around different districts to bring more women candidates to the front, to prepare them, to get them there. So it's starting to become more hopeful for women to show that we are there. Because another argument from the parliament was that, well, there are no women. There are no women candidates. There are not enough women who want to be running. That's why we can't give them quotas, because who are we going to put in there? And now the response from the women's organizations is to show, no, we have 40 candidates right now, and it could be much more if we go on. So that's kind of this part. Yes? Sorry. I don't know how much time we have. Go ahead.
Are there particular issues that the women's movement would like women to raise in Parliament? Is there something beyond just having women?
Yes. So the question is, are there specific women's issues that women would like, or specific issues that people would like for women candidates to raise in Parliament? I think that's the question. I'll mention in terms of women's issues that, and that is a problem by itself, what I'm just going to say, which is women candidates don't want to be pigeonholed in that you're going to become a woman parliamentarian to promote or to lobby for women's causes only, that you should be seen as a woman candidate like a man, just anybody, and be interested in any political platform or issues, then topics that you want to focus on and work on. So there's that first fight, to just look at women as a normal politician and not expect of them any special service or treatment or focus on any issues. In addition to that, of course, the women's movement wants male and women candidates in the parliament to fix the laws that are affecting women's status in the country. So it's kind of like a two-side approach. And the main issues for the women's movement in general are, there are still laws that are unjust for, in regards to domestic violence and sexual rape, domestic violence and harassment, things along those lines. And there's a big one which is about citizenship. Right now, Lebanese women who marry a non-Lebanese man cannot give their citizenship to the man, nor to their children who could be born and who be living in Lebanon. So that passing of citizenship from a woman to her family is right now absent, has always been absent. While a man can very simply marry a foreign woman, give her Lebanese citizenship, and the children, of course, will be born, and because he's a male father, he could pass on his citizenship. So these are like the main two big issues that, in terms of women's rights, are being asked by Parliament to be adjusted. Does that make sense? Yeah, someone here had another question? Oh, go ahead.
I thought I heard a mention in the film, someone suggesting an end of the confessional system. Was that in the film? I wonder if that is really in the discussion at all.
That's kind of like a side topic. I'm not sure if somebody may have mentioned it briefly. That's a whole other issue that I would say it's kind of off topic in a way. Yes, there is. It's something that it's a hot potato in Lebanon, and people discuss it, but I will leave it at that. It's kind of a side bar. Yes.
Compared to the U.S., how many Lebanese women work outside the home?
Oh, work outside the home. I was going to say for the political representation, Lebanon is less than, it's like 3% in the parliament. And here, I believe in Congress, it's reached 12%. So even in the US, it's not that high. It's only around 20% of women are in Congress, while Rwanda, the last I know, used to be the #1 country in the world that had the highest number of women in their parliament. So you think, women, Rwanda has the highest number of women in parliament, the US has only 12%. A number of countries in Europe have very close to 50% or 30 to 40% or somewhere around that number. But I don't know the answer to, again, about percentages. I just would just estimate kind of offhand that it's a high percentage, more than 30%. I would say 30 to 50% of women work outside the home. I guess that's the question, right?
The reason why I asked is because previously in the U.S., women working outside the home, they inherited money, and so they got their money later in life, and also they might have felt some loyalty to give it away or spend it the way their fathers or husbands would have spent, and so part of the change for women candidates for the PACs, like Office Sidelines or Emily's List, supported by both men and women, but women are making their own money, and so they feel freer, even in the balance of power within the family, to be more of an equal partner in financial decision making.
So do I need to summarize some of that for the mic? So I believe what you mentioned was that in the U.S., as more women started working outside the home, they gained more independence financially to use their money as they wished, while at the beginning, maybe as they were starting to work, they were getting their money more either through family inheritance or through the man or getting them later in life, and they felt that they were obliged to spend that money in a way that would please the males in their family. And so as more women have independence, financial independence, how to gain and use their own money, then they have more freedoms to do that. And I would say that is probably very correct, very, very applicable to Lebanon also. Right now there are women who are bank presidents, business owners, pilots, airplane pilots, tons of architects, 40% of the judges are women, engineers, tech people, they're there. But I guess that's another film maybe to answer that part. Do we still have time? I don't know. I have one or two last questions. Yes?
I was just curious how films being used or how you expect to be used, wherever in Lebanon, I'm just curious about that.
So when I made the film, as you see, I made it in English, even though there is an Arabic subtitled version and a French subtitled version, so it could be shown. It has been shown in Lebanon in a couple of places, high schools, and it was well received. There was a discussion with the Ministry of Education and some organizations that work on education to figure out if it could be used in the school educational system. So that could possibly happen in the future. But I think my original plan was to just bring awareness to the issue, to kind of shed light on the status of women in Lebanon, because I feel that, especially that I live here, like in the US, there are a lot of misconceptions about women in the Middle East overall, and they think that women are don't have much less rights than they actually do, and to show that, at least in this particular story, for the case of Lebanon and in this particular subject, that women are there. They have obstacles, but they're there. So I thought this would give a general sense to audiences, to international audiences, about the status of women in Lebanon in general. And it's shown in a few festivals and at various organizations, independent screenings. And I would hope that we could still show it more widely around the world and with more organizations or educational systems. So if you have suggestions for groups who might be interested, I'd be open to that. And the website is www.madamparliamentarian.com, so it's the name of the film.com. You can find more information, and the film is available for sale on DVD and streaming from the website. I don't know what else I can say. Is that up? How much time is it?
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.